Brad, I got the wrong intro, bro. I got the intro from the ranking of the tracks video going, but fuck it, never mind. We're here. Sorry, guys.
Live without an act.
It's definitely a Van Halen topic themed show, guys, and thank you for watching. If you're watching on a replay, please, during the course of the show, I'll include some links to Chris Gill, one of our channel friends and a special guest here that's joining us this evening where you are. I'll also include Brad. Good to see you, bro. Your links, and Mikey Mojo and John. Good to see you guys. We're here for we've just spent a couple of moments in the green room, didn't we, Mikey, talking about a few things. So we're in for a hot show, Mikey.
Yeah, it's exciting. We were just catching up in the green room about the book, and we'll do a deep dive into it and get into it, and Chris is going to enlighten us with some great background and some great stories about the origins of some of the details in the actual book. But just to kick the show off, the New York City event was such an awesome event. It was great seeing so many folks come up. I saw John online with Tanner, which was really cool. We had Dave Rodriguez come up, who runs the EVH Solos website. He came up from Florida for the show.
Wow.
We had Lewis at Fairfield was with me, and Leandro Van Halen was with us also. And I mean, there's numerous people. Gibson Les Paul was there, Les Paul Gibson. And, it's a handful of folks just all celebrating this and getting together, waiting online for 2.5 hours to get in. 400 plus people, probably close to 500 people waiting again to get in to see Al. And it was a magical day. It really was, because he was in great spirits. He looked good. We all see the footage. We know he walks with the cane now a little bit, but he wasn't frail. He was in good spirits. He looked great, and he looked like, he explained it to Lewis and myself as this whole process of writing the book for him has been a cleanse, and it has been like a healing process for him. And he's in a good space with everything, with Ed, with his brother, with the relationship, with his passing. It's been 4 years. And he took his time with people. Like, we were online 3 hours waiting to get in there. He took a break about halfway through to get some food and stuff, but he didn't rush anyone. He went up, John could probably speak for this too when he went up there. We went up there, and we'll get into it. But he took his time with people. He was very nice and cordial. His wife was there. And he asked you questions. He wanted to know what you thought. If you had questions for him, he wasn't rushing. He wanted to sit and talk to people, which was really refreshing.
Wow.
Because you're really nervous when you go up there. And I remember being online for 2+ hours. And then when I finally got like within 10 or 15 folks and saw them, I'm like, shit, what the hell am I going to say? Like, you kind of freeze up all the things you want to say. And, I've never met Al before. I've met other members in the group and never met Al. And it was great. It was a magical experience. And I'll share it with all you guys, but why don't we go around the room here, and everyone can give their kind of 2 cents of experience with the book now that we've had it a few weeks and stuff.
Just before we do that, Mikey, thank you for that wonderful thought there, group of thoughts you shared with us. And obviously we're going to keep coming back to that, because this show is about a celebration, isn't it, Chris? It is a celebration about Alex Van Halen and his book. And I think that probably leads me into the next person who was there, Brad, and that's our friend Johnny, So you were there too. You were lining up, John, with Tanner. So give us your thoughts, bro.
And Jeremy White, too. He was with us, too. And
Trouble.
Yeah, he's a handful, Jeremy. He's funny. He's a fun guy. But yeah, I was shocked. I had met Alex a few times before, and he didn't really seem to have much to say. He was kind of just, there. But I was shocked at how, like Mikey said, how he was actually interested in what you had to say, and he took his time. It was like I was shocked at how much time he took, and I didn't even, as soon as you get there, they don't give you that much time. Obviously, you can't get a real conversation going, but whatever you just start talking about, that kind of took over, and that's what basically happened with me, and it led to like. His back issue and stuff like that. I said, we're going to see you around more now, because he said something like, yeah, as long as this 71-year-old body, holds up, basically. And then I said, well, and I always knew that Alex loves racing cars. Him and his son, Malcolm. I know they got these 911s all over the place, and so I said, well, Al, you should be out racing, and that's all I had to say because he lit up as I'm walking away. He's like following, like yelling over to me as I'm walking away. He said, you're right, I should be racing. I'm quick, I'm quick. He was saying, so yeah, so it was. I was really surprised at how friendly and how interested in everyone he was. Even like when Leandro went up there, he was like giving him consoling him. Did you see him like console? Like Leandro said something, and he's like, "I know, I feel the same way. I feel." He's like, actually, he was like console. It was pretty like a cool little moment there,
Right. Yeah. When I went up, John, I kind of mentally said to myself, I don't want to go in like a dark place. I don't know how he's dealing with everything still. So I don't want to really directly mention Ed, and I miss Ed. So I was just kind of like, I just thanked him first. I'm like, it's an honor to meet you finally. And just thank you. Thank you for the music, soundtrack of my life, every cliche you've ever heard. And I cracked a joke and really made him laugh. I said, I just want you to know, we've mentioned this on your show before, Andrew and Brad. I go, you were my first concert when I was 12 years old. My cousin Joe took me in 1986. And he just put his head down and started laughing. And like a whip, his timing was like impeccable, like a comedian. He was just like, I wish we would have known, we would have watched our language. And he started laughing. And I started laughing. And then he gave me a big hug. And he's like, that's great, man. I love hearing those stories. And he goes, it's always about the music. And then I had a couple questions I wanted to ask him. And I remember saying to him, I'm like, just so you know, I love all your drumming, especially on Van Halen too. I go, but Diver Down is my favorite album for guitar tone and drum tone. And he goes, I love that one. And I go, what's your favorite performance on the albums? And I thought for sure he'd say the Dave years. And he said, fuck. He said, for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge is his favorite drum performance. Yep.
Wow.
That's very interesting.
So that was a cool little tidbit. And then I thanked him again. You're like, you can't have a conversation with him, but he would answer anything you wanted to talk about. And he gave me a hug again. I thanked him. How I said, I can't wait to get into the book. I'm really excited to reading this. I said, thanks for doing this. And he goes, thank you all for coming out. It means a lot to me. And then I walked away. So it was really cool, man. It's a good moment I'll never forget.
You know what stuck out to me really? The last time I saw Alex, he's about 6 feet tall. I'm like 5'10", and he was always, anytime I saw him, definitely taller than me, like much taller. When I saw him last week,
he's small.
I was taller than him. So that
me also.
That back issue must have been killer, man. Because it was noticeably different. He was so much smaller than he was before. But I mean, he said the X-ray on his back, there's a hole. It was like a part missing of his spine. It looked like, I guess, right?
Wow.
So I guess he was shooting a gun. I heard him saying that too, and it recoiled and it knocked him down. And it must have been, a powerful gun. He was at a shooting range or something like that, and it knocked him down on the ground, and that was it for the back. So
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then, they were helping him down the steps out of the place. The security guard was helping. He had the cane, helping him down the steps, to get out onto the sidewalk. And he did stop and reached over to sign something for somebody before they got in the car and left. And then even as he was pulling away, I was giving him the peace sign, and he was giving me the peace sign out the window. So
that's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, we saw him get out of the limo or like the town car from the airport, and we saw him walking in to the Barnes and Noble, and I saw the cane, but he was moving pretty freely. And then a buddy of mine that he's not in our community, but my friend Russell, he's like in the Kiss Army. He's the Kiss community, with a Van Halen community, but he came because he likes Van Halen. And he was telling me that his buddy, and I forget the guy's name, it might have been Steve. He's like, my buddy was with them at the airport and made the ride over. He's like, he might have came off the plane and like in a wheelchair, and then they got him up. And I'm like, really? So I didn't hear or see any of that, but that's something just to look into. Maybe he's really having a hard time with it. I don't know.
I definitely think he is, for sure.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
But you guys should come up to Norwood. I know you guys had the party going in New York, man. But if you came up to Norwood, I was going to buy everybody pizza and beer, and we're going to go toilet paper Al Dimeola's house because he lives only a short distance away, man. You would have missed out on a real good time. We probably would have ended up in jail. But
we can still, Chris, we can still do it. Okay, we don't need a book signing to do it.
I'm definitely coming up.
That's a good idea. Let's go. Let's go TP Al's. Al Dimeola, the other Al.
The other Al.
Yeah.
It's funny, Lewis, our buddy Lewis over Lewis Coster at Fairfield had met Al like about a year ago. He went up at Al's birthday. I think Al's here in New Jersey, right? And
yeah, really he's nice, up
Alpine or something. Or
no, he's not Alpine. No, he's not that posh.
Yeah. He's in a
No,
nice area. I know that. North
he lives in
somewhere.
Japan, basically. So, but yeah, I've been to the house. You know, he's a Jersey guy. You know, you
Yeah.
kind of you look at Elegant Gypsy and everything, and you think he's going to be very suave, sophisticated. Like, hey, how you doing? You know, come on in. Hey, you know, get the gabagoo. We got some Chianti over here. You know,
Right. And you want
yeah,
to
I
laugh,
got this
Chris?
jade. This guy in Japan gave me a bunch of this jade. This Chinese guy or something like that. I think it's fake. Is it fake? You check it out. Tell me if it's fake.
Chris, I was trying so hard to get to his house. I'll tell you this quick backstory. During COVID, you remember everything was shut down. Guys
Right.
weren't touring. There was no club dates. They weren't making money, right? They weren't touring or making music. They were making music, but everything was shut down. Him and his wife were doing these great meet and greet dinners at his house.
Yep.
You saw that,
Yep.
right? And
Mhm.
you went on his website and they had levels. VIP level might have been 10 grand. And it worked its way down, 5 grand, and the cheap one was like 1,500 or 2,500 bucks. And I'm like, shit, I'm sending an email in because I want to go meet Al Demola and I live in New Jersey. And I wrote like 3 emails and they didn't respond. But basically, the package is like you go to his house. They have a great like Italian dinner all set up,
Yep.
like col antipasta, a hot session, and then like a main course and this and that and appetizers. And then depending on the level of what you paid up to the VIP level, you get to jam with him, see his guitar collection, all this cool stuff, autographs, whatever. I'm like, I want to do that. Like I don't care. It's COVID. I'm going to Al's house. But I never got them to respond to me. But that would have been really cool to
He
go
still
check it
does
out.
it. Just get on his Instagram. He does it from time to time, actually. So I'm planning
Yeah,
on
I'm gonna
going
do
down
it.
here sometime. So,
But he's
But
laying
Lewis
up the
got to go
pasta,
there because
right?
Lewis made him a cool guitar strap for his birthday, and he plays it out, which is really
yeah,
nice.
yeah,
Lewis found the crest of his Italian name from Italy and at
yeah.
Demola, and he made it's a black leather strap with the gold Demola crest. It's awesome.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
So it's a pretty cool story.
Well, let's get back to the other Al. So let's people are here for Van Halen. So
Yeah.
not for jazz fusion.
There's Lou.
That is, I got a similar picture, but my phone is. I'm using the phone for the the podcast.
Cool.
Weather was beautiful. It was a beautiful day then.
It was the perfect day when we went.
It's what's going on here. I mean, what the hell is going on? It's like flipping the 1st of November, and it's like I'm wearing
It's
shorts.
80
and
degrees.
It's 80 degrees outside.
I got shorts on. It's 80 degrees in New Jersey.
Yeah.
It's November 1st.
It hasn't rained in over a month. Mount Fuji hasn't had snow at the latest
Yeah.
time in its history. It's like, what's
Crazy.
going on?
That's crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
I
guess because Alex wrote a book, Hell Froze Over,
Yeah.
Right.
or heaven burned over or something like that, because Al wrote a book. So I guess.
Exactly, right?
Chris and John, I got a quick question for you. What we were just talking about, John, about Al's health. That's probably why he put all the equipment up for auction, right? Like a month or two ago. He probably doesn't play anymore.
He's said, if you've read the interviews, he's because there's so many of them out there. I'm still catching up on them because I've got to actually do work, and make a living and everything like that. But he's done so many interviews. But he says he hasn't got rid of everything. He still plans on playing, but the problem is just his back condition. He's kind of hoping for some technology to help him out. And I don't know. I feel bad because that stuff moves slow and it may not be what you want it to be. I mean, my God, everyone has looked at my Instagram to see what the hell AI is wreaking upon this world.
He mentioned that in the interview. The cool thing in the book is, though, he's got his first Ludwig kit that he spent $1,000 on, which is awesome.
Correct.
And the Rosewood snare, I guess, that he used on 1984. He still has that. I think he just had a warehouse full of stuff that he's never going to do anything with again. He said, I might as well. I don't want to pay for this warehouse anymore. I'm never going to use this stuff. Sell it. The people want to buy it.
Right.
Liquidate
Drums take up room. That's the thing. It's like guitars are pretty, you can stash a lot of them into a relatively small space, but a drum kit, man, that's a whole other deal. And I've never really known drummers to be like, I'm a drum kit collector.
You're right.
My brother actually, he collected vintage snares and stuff like that, but it's like, I know there's people out there with megabucks and they've got whatever. The people who live in Alpine, probably have like garages and underground lairs full of drum kits, but the average drummer guy out there I've got my kit. Maybe you got another kit and that's about it. You got some snares, you got some replacement stuff, you got your Octobans and your Rototoms.
Right.
So
I got the impression that he, from being there that day and just chatting with him a little bit, that he's the same way Ed would always say, you're a musician, I play till you die. I kind of feel that Alex still is eager to play in some, might be Alex Van Halen jazz trio or something like that. I still think
the cool thing in the one interview with the woman, Ariel, whatever her name was, is that he was talking about the unfinished music, unfinished, and some other tracks. He goes, and he said, Ed and I have a lot of stuff, and he's like, and when I get to it, I want to put it out. So that's kind of cool. Hopefully he can, and he'll be. But he did say I have to be happy with it to present it. It has to be presentable. I know what I want to do with it. He said. And he's like, I know what Ed would want. He's like, but, and he said he wants to put it out. And he says he'd have a lot of material they were working on together. That would be really cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
If that
Al needs to learn to let things go a bit. He needs to learn to delegate. I mean, I don't want to tell him what to do with his life, but
Right.
Al is getting old and things are going on, and he does need help in that aspect. And I don't want to start off on the bad foot, but he needs to get people who know what they're doing. Who know Van Halen, who know its history, who know when they come across something that it's actually that it's some type of nugget. And I mean, even the song that he released, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but the backstory he's given on that is not really correct.
accurate. Right. It's not accurate.
Yeah, it's not accurate, and that's, I don't seem like an asshole, but it's like I am a historian, and facts matter, and it matters for all you fans out there. You need to know what really is going on, and people's memories are different and everything like that. And sometimes you need a referee, and that's kind of what my role
You're
is.
right, Chris. And to Al's defense, like he wasn't sober for 40 years. He's not going to remember that stuff.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Got to remember that.
Sadly, we can tell.
Right. He needs.
I'll leave it at that.
He needs someone like you said, a historian, or like I don't know how involved or his relationship with Matt Bruck. Matt obviously knows a lot of that information. And obviously, if the time came, Wolfie could assist and Matt could assist. But
yeah, and
Wolfie's
even somebody else outside.
Even
he thanks Brian Kehoe in the back of the book. Brian Kehoe worked on. We all know this. He worked on a box set in the early 2000s. Going into the early 2010s. We've heard that stuff. It's been leaked of what he was working on, the works in progress and everything, the unfinished, stuff of the alternate takes of Dance the Night Away and all that type of stuff. He was working on a box set, and it's like, pick up on that project. If anything, start there. If not, I mean, there's other stuff out there we know of. I mean, we've gone over this before. Midnight Hour, first thing they recorded in 5150, when it was built. That's out there. It's got to be out there, unless it got destroyed or something like that, which I doubt. Start with that. Work your way up through the stuff. Okay, yeah, I know Al's not really the biggest fan of Sammy Hagar, but there was a lot of stuff on the side. Some finished, some almost finished, some that could be finished. Yeah. There's that stuff. I've always mentioned, about this 1999 second record with Sharon, which I'll come out and give you guys a little spoiler, because unfinished, I've alluded to a few people in a close camp circle that was was part of that 1999 record. It wasn't actually. It goes back earlier than that. So it's an interesting story. Yeah. There's stuff. There is stuff. And of course there's, Ed stuff that's only going to be for the hardcore people. Ed playing piano, Ed playing cello, that kind of stuff. Steve Vai mentioned something about this solo guitar thing that Ed did that was just the most insane, crazy guitar he's ever heard in his life. Where is that? Right. Where is
all the stuff he did with Dweezil? Like, he did a lot of recording for Dweezil, and Dweezil, was engineering him, and he was engineering Dweezil, but there was a lot of that stuff. And I'm surprised.
He mentioned in the interviews, which is not in the book because he didn't get into that era, the stuff. They had Chris Cornell over for a short period of time. They had to have been recording that. They had to have been, because we know how it was when they did rehearsals, later with Wolf and Al, that they recorded all that stuff.
And how about the stuff with Iommi, with Sabbath? He did stuff with Tony Iommi.
Yeah.
And then there was a recent thing where they said they brought Ozzy in at one point, right? Or something. I was reading.
Yeah, I think Ozzy was just got to the talking point. I don't think Ozzy ever got to, to him coming over there, because they probably have to exercise 5150 at this point.
That's what I read. Yeah, I remember reading that. Right.
Yeah. That was around the same time as Sharon, though. It was basically Sharon. I mean, unfortunately, Al, when he said that one, the Rolling Stone interview, he said, like, and then then Cornell died. It's like, well, yeah, Cornell died in 2017. He was so far out of the picture for you guys. Both himself, he had Audio Slave and the reunion of Soundgarden in between that time. It was really
right. And his solo acoustic tours, which I've seen 2 of those in between.
And those, yeah. It was really around 2000, 2001. And because Ed told me about Cornell. I mean, if you've read the Guitar Aficionado thing, he just mentions that there's a weird Vox guitar organ where Alice is like, yeah, I brought this thing out when Chris Cornell was over here. We were working on some stuff, and it's like, God, that guy I was making the weirdest sounds in it, and Chris Cornell was singing along. That dude will sing along to anything,
right.
And he'd mentioned it was in the early 2000s. And of course, we know Roth was even kind of milling about in that period. So it was, Gary quit November 1999. What are we going to do next? And they were going through all these possibilities. That's really about the only time, because then you had 2003 and 04. They got back together with Sammy. They went into a little bit of a dark down period. 05, 06, Dave's back. And pretty much Dave was back for the rest of the time. So...
Pete Thorne said that Ed did record a guitar solo for that acoustic solo or something for one of Chris Cornell's songs. So he did it, and then it exists and it's somewhere. So I don't know if that can be ever, dropped onto the recording of it and remixed and let out at some point too. I kind of we've been led for the last 20 years with limited information about anything. And it's always been negative stuff like that. And I kind of feel like Alex enjoyed himself doing that little couple days of book stuff like that. And as long as he is healthy enough, his back, I feel like, Wolfgang's at 5150 doing his 3rd record right now.
Yeah.
I almost feel like when that wraps, I think Al's probably got, hey, maybe he's going to get Brian Keyu and go up there and say, Brian, can you catalog all this stuff? Can you drop it on a CD or something that I could listen and try to remember? And let's see what we got here. And I got some stuff in mind. I have some tapes here, Brian. So take a look at this stuff. And I'm going to try to be positive about it. And I feel like when Wolfgang finishes up at 5150, Alex is going to, spend some time in there and go through some of that stuff. I was shocked at how I never thought he'd want to release it. Because even Wolf was kind of like, pushing it off, saying, you know what, all the good stuff was out there. They released already. They
whatever was not out popped didn't want out. And saying that it
was really promising with that LA event where he, when he heard the cheers of all the people saying that he's going to work on this stuff. I think that's the kind of feedback that he needs to get. Because it's one thing to go off onto a forum and see a few people posting about stuff, but when you have a full audience of people saying like, yes, I think, you start to think like, okay, maybe I should entertain that. Maybe I should go down that path. And again, he doesn't have to take the burden on himself. Like you were saying, he just needs someone to filter stuff out for him and say, I found this. What do you think? They do the hard work. They go through all the stuff. They do the digging and the sifting and everything like that.
They do the heavy lifting, right?
They do the heavy lifting, and then they present it to him.
Well, that's what Wolfie did, right? Before he did the second album. Some of our friends, Matt Bruck, went over to 5150 with Adam Reeder from F.u.c.k. And he basically, Wolfie's like, I need everything cataloged, right? I need to know what's here, Pop's equipment.
Well, that's the guitar stuff. Yeah, the guitar stuff they did the whole
thing. And
they had to basically, because it was just kind of he had not taken any inventory of everything, and they need to ensure all that stuff. They need to make sure it doesn't just happen to walk off with somebody.
Just catalog it and inventory it. This way, when Wolfie did his album, all right, I want to use the Dirty Movies SG. I want to use Dad's Plexi. I want to use Frankie. Well, obviously, he knew what Frankie was, but I think
they know where it was.
Al needs to do the same thing with the.
But that happened when I was up there in 2013. Even when I asked, they asked me, hey, Ed had pulled out a bunch of stuff in advance when I got there and was all sitting there on the floor in the main tracking room, and it's like, anything else you want to see? And I'm like, oh, the Ripley. I want to see the Ripley. And it's like, they couldn't remember where it was. And then Matt took me down to the garage where it might be, and all of a sudden he distracted me with his incredible collection of British amps. And I'm just like, oh well, forget the Ripley. I kind of forgot, to be honest. I was like just shell shocked by this multitude of cool, obscure British amps. It's just like, oh my god, I didn't even know some of this stuff existed before.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Understandable, Chris. Totally understandable.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. I just think the fact that, like Chris said, that the audience reaction in the live theater in LA last week was so overwhelmingly positive. So when he mentioned that I have some stuff and I want to do something with it, that coupled with the fact that the book hit the New York Times bestseller chart at #2, and I think he's probably like, wow, man, there still are people out there. He's been away from this for a while. Like he said, his
9
house,
years.
his home, he's completely removed from this. And now he's kind of feeling like, wow, there are still people out there that care about all this stuff, and not just our little group. Obviously, if it's #2 on the on the bestseller list.
Right.
I don't want to give away any industry secrets or anything like that, but I'm privy to some information, and the total number of books that have sold in the first week are pretty much approaching the level of what the Van Halen 3 album did in its entirety. And we're talking about a week here. And we're talking about the book industry, which books do not sell anywhere near as much as records do. So it's just it's much more limited than people would ever imagine, and the fact that he came out with those type of numbers for a flipping book. I mean, if anyone, I'm sure someone from HarperCollins had to explain to him just how phenomenal the success of this thing is.
Right.
That he's got to realize that there's demand still.
Wow.
There's still demand. I mean, even a different kind of truth. It's basically, selling at a level comparable to a different kind of truth, and it's a damn book.
Yeah, and to your point, Chris, I think that obviously this whole community was going to buy it regardless of what it was going to be about, right? It could have been anything that he put out. But I think the common public or the reading public or the Times bestseller public knows it's his story, right? About Ed, brothers called Brothers. I think people are really interested in that. People want to think, all right, everyone else is writing this story. What's the brother have to say? I think it's a very inquisitive thing that people want to know. People.
It's a very good point, because I was just kind of scanning some of the reviews on Amazon, and I don't think, a lot of people who are getting this book are not the hardcore like us Van Halen fans that read every single thing that comes out, read every single magazine article and all that kind of stuff. This is probably the first Van Halen product that they've bought possibly since 5150 or 1984.
Right.
So that's the type of reach that it's having.
It's personal.
Really, it's personal.
Right.
So, and I can criticize the book, but at the same time, it's like, Al did what he needed to do. And I think it's a good thing, because it's like the band needed this at this point. They needed this jolt, because it's hard as hell for guys like me to get the ball rolling and get the momentum. I'm happy with how Eruption's done. It's been 3 years, and it's been in and out of the Amazon Top 100 rock books consistently over those 3 years. And that doesn't really happen often in the book industry either. Usually, I've done books before that they come out, they're out for a month, and then the next thing you know, they're in the back of, you remember Crown Books? They're even gone. But it was like in the back of Crown Books for like $5 or whatever, amongst the cat calendars, and whatever. Yeah. So it's a tough business, but
it is. Hey, Chris, to your point, it's great. Your book is doing phenomenal. I love your book. Even our friend Gary Rosen. I mean, he's 2 or 3 editions in, right? 4 editions.
Yeah,
in.
Yeah. He's several editions in. So I mean, there's
celebrate,
interest there, but
we celebrate you guys doing this and keeping it going.
But Al, it takes Al to break through that, because we're out there slogging it, and everything like that, and trying to get attention. And it's not. I mean, we got a mention in Rolling Stone, but we didn't get the New York Times. New York Times was like, oh, you're those lowbrow guys writing about that metal band. We don't play Van Halen at our parties at the Hamptons. So it's like, we didn't get that coverage. We didn't get a lot of this mainstream coverage. We had to fight for what we got as it was. But that's Alex is getting all this great stuff, and Van Halen all of a sudden is people are talking about it.
Yeah,
and that's great.
3 city book tour is a big deal,
Yeah.
500, I don't know how many people were in LA, but we had 500 at the Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I was a little disappointed about the whole promotional setup of this whole thing. He really didn't do much of anything. I'm thinking like, man, CBS Sunday morning, like a 15-minute segment, walking around his horse farm, talking about the book and stuff like that.
Well,
perfect.
That's tough. I mean, that's tough to get, even for an Alex Van Halen. That stuff's tough to get, because I mean, come on, if it was Taylor Swift, this is the world we live in. If it was Katy Perry, sure,
Pearl
it's Alex
Jam
Van
got one.
Halen.
You know, one of my other favorite bands. I just went to see the tour, and Pearl Jam got a CBS 20-minute spot, and like
Really?
that's a hard thing to
Yeah.
get.
That's
Not
a
that Pearl
it's a
Jam
really
isn't
hard thing to
relevant
get.
anymore, but people really don't know that
Yeah.
90s band. Nobody knows them.
And that's, that's as the band thing and they're on tour and stuff like that. When it's a book, I mean,
Right.
holy fuck, we couldn't even get Eddie Trunk to have us on his show. Come on.
Really?
Yeah, come on.
I know that's just,
So that's how tough it is. So we got Howard Stern. And it was I tried to go through Steve Nowicki. And he says no. Howard just picked it up. We sent Howard in advance of the book before it came out, and it took him a year before it's like, oh, I think I'll check this thing out. And he somehow got himself a copy of the audiobook and went on vacation and listened to it, and then came back and did like a 30-minute segment on it. It's like, holy crap.
Yeah. Well, listen, Chris, Jim Florentine, you know him, right? That metal show, it's Eddie Trunk, Jim Florentine, and the other guy.
Right,
Jim
right.
Florentine lives in the next town. I'm friendly with him. I'm going to tell him to get you on Trunk.
Okay, cool.
His son,
Mikey.
Florentine's son, plays basketball with my friend's son, so I see him a lot in town.
Hey, that's what we need. That's what we need. It's small
Those
world.
Jersey boys.
We need the small world connections here, man. That's what we need. But yeah, more about Alex's book. I wanted to say my overall impression of it. As a hardcore fan, it's a lot of stuff that we've read before. There's a lot of that, but I do appreciate the stuff that was in between. The little comments here and there, the little bit of insight. I really loved the parts where he just kind of went off and free associated and like the interludes, and stuff like that. That to me was the gold. And I can't criticize a book for what I want it to be. I have to criticize it for what it is. But that's the stuff to me. That stuff is worth the price of admission. That's the little stuff that we haven't gotten before. And the only thing I can say is I wish, and I don't wish it was like as tawdry and tell all as Monk's book, but I do wish he kind of took that tack where it's just like, screw retelling the band's history. Here's a bunch of crazy shit that happened. Here's my thoughts about, or like even David Lee Roth, Free Association and Crazy from the Heat. He just jumped all over the place, but we got all this interesting stuff.
Right.
And Al, you don't need to be the Van Halen historian. I mean, I do get it because this is a big book and there's a lot of people out there who don't know the story of the band, and so you kind of probably felt an obligation to retell it. But it would have been so much cooler to kind of have 10% history and 90% insight, Al, thoughts, incidents. Right. I mean, unfortunately, yeah, we're talking about, he probably doesn't remember, unfortunately, because of the substance abuse and everything. He probably doesn't remember a lot. So there is that, I guess. But it would have been, golden to me with that. But it still was great. It still was good to hear his voice throughout, and tell that it was really, him speaking to a ghostwriter, but it was him speaking. So that's the cool thing.
You know what I liked, Chris? Quick shout outs to Bona Jams. I see him having a chat. Andy Carson, Chris Live. So I seen Keith Campbell. What I do like was the origin, how he started the book, obviously from the beginning. I wanted to read about the boat ride over, how the family went from Indonesia to Holland. I didn't know all those stories. I knew factually all those things, but not how it evolved in the timeline. So I actually really enjoyed the beginning of the book. I really enjoyed when he was talking about the boat ride over, how it took weeks, and that they were very young, the boys, right? And how what he remembers from that boat ride, other than the music, was the smell of the boat. And he can't describe the smell, but what the smell was, he's like, I know that smell to this day. That's really heavy stuff, right? That's heavy stuff.
That's It
I
was 2 weeks.
that.
It was 2 weeks that it took for them to get over. I'm such a fucking nerd. I know exactly when they left. February 22nd, they arrived March 9th. So
and
Ed was 7, not 6.
He put you on the boat like the Titanic. Obviously, they're in the lower class, like Leo DiCaprio on the Titanic. And then they found a way to scheme, and not scheme, but like, there's talent and music with the captain. So let's go play. Come on, boys, let's go play piano. Ed, now go play piano. All of a sudden, they're sitting with the captain, eating in first class. I love seeing all that stuff of his journey, and then obviously he gets into it. But that stuff I enjoyed, other than the 90% that I knew.
Well, that was the stuff, because that's the stuff for people like me who do these things. We concentrate on the band Van Halen. We talked with Ed a little bit about that stuff, but it's really, especially in a guitar magazine, that stuff's a paragraph or two. It's not an in-depth type of thing that we get into.
Right.
And yeah, it was really good to see that, you know, especially for a general audience. And I'm glad that he remembered a lot of that stuff. I guess that's before the substances kicked in. So
like it was their mom's family who was the sponsor who got them to Pasadena.
Oh, yeah.
Like I didn't know the
Yeah,
route.
yeah.
And Dad wanted to stop in
Mikey.
Chicago for the blues and stay in Chicago, but they kept going. You know, they could have been Chicago.
Yeah,
that was really, really interesting, and I just want to add to what Mikey just said, guys. You know, I was really fascinated too with the influence the mum had on the boys with their music. Yeah, you know, I wasn't aware of that she propelled these boys, she pushed them. You know, I had this impression, you know, that, you know, because you see the photos of this little petite Indonesian lady, I had this view that, you know, she was in the background, but no, she was she was the she was that huge dynamic. So that was really interesting, Mikey.
Right.
I don't have a wooden spoon to grab here, but I was going to grab a wooden spoon and wave it around. That's what she was.
Yeah.
It's like,
great point, Andrew. You just assume it was Jan because Dad was the classically jazz, you know, clarinet player. But I love in the point in the book where he goes, that piano made it all the way to Pasadena. He goes, it was in pieces, but Mom made us put it back together.
yeah.
That was great.
Yeah. It's very cool. It's, you know, and what else was I going to add about that stuff? I mean, it was, you know, that stuff is like that, you know, I guess personally I wanted more of that. Again, I'm talking here about what I wanted, not what the book was, but it was just like, gosh, I could have gone on with, you know, maybe just a little bit more about those, you know, those formative years, you know, especially as they were starting to play. I mean, we've all heard the drums, you know,
right.
Ed started on drums and, you know, and Alex started on guitar and whatever. And,
right.
You know, it's like I would have liked to hear a little bit more about the bands, you know.
He jumped around to your freeform, like the relationship with the cousins. It was competitive because they were musicians, and then that, you know, Jan went to jail. They know to get him out for a few weeks, right? And but the mom's cousin didn't love the dad, so they left him in jail. Like all that little family dynamic was cool to read about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was kind of cool. It was kind of painful though too. I mean, the fact that he beat up his dad twice. Ouch.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that was a big surprise.
That was kind of like you violently beat your father and kind of let the public know about it. It's like, ooh.
Yeah.
That was a rough part. That was
a rough part
indeed. Like, yikes. I mean, that was very confessional, maybe a little bit too confessional.
He went deep.
Yeah, he did go deep. And you know, that section in particular, it was very deep. So it was that was something, you know, that was definitely eye-opening, you know, because I knew that the parents fought and everything like that, but I didn't know that the kids got kind of involved too.
They got involved, right?
Yeah. So
I've got one other question I want to check out for you guys that I picked up in the book, and I wasn't aware of this too. I didn't realize how determined Alex was when it came to Eddie doing the guitar solo for Michael Jackson, and how betrayed and pissed off he was.
Yes. You know, as you were talking, I was thinking exactly about that, because that was also another big thing. And it's like very interesting perspective, you know, and wow, because it's like, it was the biggest. It is. Michael Jackson's Thriller is the best-selling album of all time. It's the most successful record of all time. There was no stopping. I went back and just because I've done this before, but just as I read that stuff, I went back and I looked at the Billboard charts, and, you know, and it used to be a lot easier. For some reason, they put it behind a paywall, and they've done all this other crap and everything like that. And you have to kind of dig around a little bit more and do a bunch of independent searches to find stuff. But let's fully ignore the entirety of 1983 when that album had popped in and out of the #1 position several times. Okay, we're heading into the year 1984. And Van Halen's 1984 album is supposed to come out on like New Year's Eve. They missed the deadline. It comes out a week later, January 7th. Well, all during that duration. Okay, eventually 1984, as albums used to do back then, they didn't debut at #1. They always was a slow climb up to the #1 thing. And Thriller went through the same struggle before it finally got there and everything. Well, at this particular period in time, Thriller was sitting at #1 on January 1st, on January 7th, on January 14th, and it went on and on and on all the way through the middle of April 1984. It was just flipping unstoppable at that point. And 1984 reached #2 on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 1984. Well, it's just timing, guys. You know, I mean, you would have been there had there not been the world's best-selling album,
of all time.
just dominating, obliterating the charts. You know, and
Right.
you can't really you can't blame anybody. You know, and yes, Ed played on Beat It, but there was also all these other singles on there. There was MTV all over that stuff. My God, it was just Halloween. And how many times do you still see people doing the Thriller dance out there? You know, now you've got, you know, housewives out there raising money for charity, and groups of 50 of them, you know, doing it. You know, you go to Manhattan and there's groups of people, you know, dressed as zombies doing the Thriller dance.
Right.
You know,
I often think, like you, Chris, I think of that same exact scenario with that album and the competitiveness. And obviously Dave had that issue with the album, right? But I look at it like you had Toto basically as the backing band. You had Luke doing all the guitar parts. You know, you had Quincy Jones producing it. Now take Ed out of the equation, right? Say Ed wasn't involved. Say Lukather does a killer solo on that song. How much does the album really change? Probably still sells 100 million.
It doesn't change its sales at all. And you know what? Michael Jackson I think Michael Jackson and Ed being involved in that record actually helped out Van Halen more than Van Halen helped out Michael Jackson, to be honest.
That's
you know, I think that Ed did help Michael Jackson.
Yeah,
you know, I
brought some of us over.
Crossover,
right,
and everything, and there was people that wouldn't consider him, and you know, people that were like, "Well, I'm going to buy this solo album because that Van Halen solo is just so damn cool." Right. You know, or I'm a big Van Halen fan, and I'm just going to buy it because it's Ed. You know, I think there was that, but I think there was probably more people on the Michael Jackson side that were like, "Oh, he's that guy, you know, who played the solo on Beat It. I like that. I'm going to check them out." And of course, they had the perfect album to capture those people. You know, they you know, jump.
Yeah, I agree, Chris.
You know,
I've always thought that, and when I read that part of the book, I mean, I'm just trying to sit back and listen to you fine gentlemen discuss all this, and I'm enjoying it. But I agree, Chris, totally, that I think Michael Jackson, his album, whether Ed was associated with it or not, still would have got to where it did. And I do believe that it opened up the avenue for everyone to go investigate Van Halen if they weren't fans of Van Halen. So I think it's definitely that is the reason that I don't think Alex should be so upset about it still after all these years. I'm sure.
No. And here's the thing, and I brought this up before. You know, it's like, okay, what's he upset about? A number one position on a flipping chart that wasn't scientific back then. You know, it was just basically they would call up a bunch of major record stores and they go like, "What's selling?" They go like, let's see, Michael Jackson Thriller, that's still selling. Let me see here. Oh yeah, we're moving on to the Van Halen record. We're moving the Footloose soundtrack. We're moving this, we're moving that. You know, whatever. You know, and it's like it wasn't even scientific. So it was kind of arbitrary. Unfortunately, it's like the New York Times bestseller list in some respects. It's really not a scientific thing either. You know, you have the New York Times editors sit out there and they kind of figure out what's selling, but they also they filter stuff out. If it doesn't really quite fit with what they want to present and whatever, if it's too lowbrow or whatever, it's not going to get mentioned in there. You know,
here's the thing too, Chris, like had they've never gone to number one, maybe I see their point. Didn't 5150 go to number one right after that?
5150. I mean, the subsequent albums, Van Halen albums, went to number one. They had a whole.
Who cares? Who flipping cares? They went.
It's a flipping
not like
number.
They never went to number one. It was because of Michael Jackson.
Well, and you know, there's many great albums out there that never went to number one. Led Zeppelin 4 never went to number one. You know, I think the Boston debut album never went to number one, and that thing sold 20 million copies. You know, they sold 10 million copies of 1984. That's the only diamond platinum album that they have, along with the debut album. You know, so
I think 1984.
You got that.
Both of them thought, both of Eddie and Alex, you could tell from the book, they thought that was their masterpiece, 1984. And I think that's a big part of it. I think that's the one that they think history is going to remember the most, even more than the first album. Maybe it's close, obviously.
It is. I think it is. And I'm sure it's, if you look at the actual numbers, I wouldn't doubt that 1984 has sold more copies than the debut album. You know, again, I don't have that information. I'm not saying that they will.
Well, I think
they say that you know Van Halen has never paid because Warner Brothers won't pay to have the albums recertified. I think the last time it was done was 1997, and it was like 10 million at that point. But I saw an estimate on like Chartmasters or something that 1984 is around 25 million. They're saying now, and
that's probably worldwide though too, actually. But that's still a lot. I mean, of course, they also put out all these remasters and over again, you know, and stuff. So they're still selling new copies of it. So I mean, I know I've gotten a few myself. I know I've gotten a few promo, and I've bought a few. You know, so there you go.
Guys, how telling do you think it was? And we're talking about 1984. There were a couple of references where Alex is comparing the sound that Van Halen were trying to get through the early part of their career and were kind of successful at it, in their opinions, to Led Zeppelin. They wanted that big Led Zeppelin sound. You know, it was interesting how they were always comparing that big sound, John, to a Led Zeppelin sound. Again, a revealing point for me.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think, I think Led Zeppelin was much more of an influence on them than they kind of lead you to believe. You always hear about Cream and Clapton and stuff like that, but
Right.
I think Led Zeppelin, and maybe more so even for Alex. But
Well,
I
I was
mean,
just going to say that, Conk, that Al
Yeah.
is a Bonham guy, true blue. And that's why in the beginning comments when we started this, when I asked Al what his favorite performance was,
Yeah.
he said, fuck, because Andy Johns, who produced Zeppelin, got him a phenomenal fucking drum sound,
Yeah.
very reminiscent to Bonham. And that's why he loves that album.
Yep.
That's what he was chasing all those years, like Ed was chasing other stuff.
Yeah.
100%. He's a
Wow.
Bonham guy, true blue.
And I think, but being a massive Zeppelin fan myself, I think that's why I gravitate to that album the most.
Yeah.
Larger than life drum sound on that album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got a question for you, gentlemen. You guys have read the book, obviously, but have you listened to the audiobook? Has everyone listened to the audiobook?
I haven't yet, Brad.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
have. I read it and listened to it.
Yeah, well, so I mean, from my perspective, the audiobook, it's very touching and emotional. I mean, there's a little bit more of that in it because Alex has made it very special by narrating it. And you can really hear, through his voice and everything, the real struggles, they dealt with not being able to speak English, the segregation sort of thing that they went through. And how they went through it all together. I know a lot of the information there, was stuff we'd probably heard and read a million times over, being massive fans, but it was good to hear it, read by Alex, because he could hear and feel the sentiment behind what was being written. And I think, you go listen to, I mean, we know the backstory of his mum, his dad, but you could really hear the relationship that he had with his dad, his mum, how important they were in those early stages of their, coming up being musicians and really pushing pushing the band to be the best musicians they could possibly be.
Right.
I really enjoyed listening to Alex talk about the tracks and the recording. I mean, we've there's a lot of documentation out there, a lot of stuff we've read and that, but hearing Alex talk about it. You mentioned, Andrew, about the Zeppelin comparison that was popping up all the time. I had a deep feeling within my body that it was always, Zeppelin that they were sort of striving to get drum sound wise, and not necessarily sound like Led Zeppelin, but that bigger, acoustic sort of sound that Bonham naturally got, and that was Jimmy Page's mastery as a producer that managed to get that. And that shines through in the whole audiobook for me, because I haven't got a copy of the book yet. I won't go into that. That's been a bit of a disaster on Amazon's part, but and the one thing that really resonates with me with Alan and Ed is the swing and the natural timing they had together. Their timing is different to normal 4/4, in my opinion. They've got their own timing,
Right.
and you can really hear when he's talking about Ed in particular. Sure, he's still mad with still mad with him about the Michael Jackson thing, the Beat It thing, and stuff like that. But I found it really moving and really touching how Alex kept acknowledging how brilliant Ed was, his ability, how genius basically Ed was, and coming from Alex's voice, that you can tell the sentiment, not just reading it, but you could hear it. So, I think it's a really good thing to listen to it, even read it first, but then listen to it. I think that would be an amazing thing. I mean, the fights, I was shocked when I heard he beat up his dad as well. I thought that was something that I'm surprised he put that in the book, which is pretty deep and dark. but the respect he has for David Lee Roth.
Oh, I was very surprised with that also, Brad.
Yeah, and also, I mean, no matter what they went through with David Lee Roth, the respect he still got for him, and obviously how he feels that they wouldn't have got anywhere without Dave at the start because of his showman, his egotistical ways.
Right. His work ethic, even though he was a rich kid, right? He was shocked at his work ethic.
Exactly, Mikey. And the couple of things I just want to say, and I'm going to leave it open for you guys to discuss, is just hardly talking about Michael Anthony in the book was a sore point for me. I found that pretty hard to take on because I'm a big Michael Anthony fan as well. And the only disappointing part of the book for me was that, and probably feeling like ending at 1984, I feel like as a fan of Van Halen that a massive chunk of why I love Van Halen is completely been missed. And, you know, I'm hoping and praying that Alex, you know, sees the success of this book and maybe does another book about, you know, the Sammy era and the Gary era and past to basically the, you know, a different kind of truth or something like that, just to give us more insight from his perspective, because this is all his perspective, I guess, besides certain things I'm sure Chris is going to discuss coming forward and whatnot. But your thoughts on this, guys? I mean, I've given you guys a lot of stuff here, but you know, also, Mike, I just wanted to thank you personally for sending us all that stuff. I felt like I was experiencing that meet and greet with Alex.
It was great.
Your eyes, mate, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. And before we turn it over to Chris, I want to make just 2 quick points before I forget. What you mentioned about Ed and Al and the sound and the timing. I like how he mentions in some of the interviews I heard for the book how Ed plays in sixths, right? He's like, Ed doesn't have timing. He just plays by feel. We all know that. He was like, but Ed plays in sixths. I like that little comment that he said about that. And Alan Garber made a great point in the chat. Yeah. Page produced all of Zeppelin. I meant engineering. Eddie Kramer was a famous engineer, and Andy and Glenn Johns, obviously, were the engineers. And Page produced everything to get those great drum sounds, the miking and Headley Grange and all that great stuff in the foyer. But Boner Jams has a good question in there too. If it wasn't for John Bonham doing the Sammy tour, what other drummers would you think could do Alex for some of the older Van Halen stuff? Like, who would you select other than Jason Bonham, who I thought was
Mike
a good
Portnoy.
fit because of the Bonham lineage, how Alex was a John guy? Like, who do you guys think would do an Alex if they did something like some kind of tribute or something?
What Andrew just said, I'd back that 100%.
What was that, Andrew?
Mike Portnoy.
Mike Portnoy. Good to see Mike is back with Dream Theater, and they've just started a tour. Their new album should be released this month at some stage, so you know we kind of look forward to that. But you know, definitely Mike Portnoy for me. And there's some great comments here in the chats. But
How
Mike
about
Portnoy.
Zach Starkey, who played with Page and Plant, Ringo's son, Zach Starkey, is that his name?
Yeah.
He did all the Page Plant tours. He's kind of got that kind of feel.
Yeah.
I think that was Michael Lee who did.
Michael Lee, yes, thank you. I'm
Michael
sorry.
Lee.
Zach
Why?
plays with the Who. Michael
The
Lee.
Who.
So I'm
Yeah,
thinking
Zach
of.
Who.
I'm thinking of
Yes,
Michael
yes.
Lee. I like that guy.
He passed away, unfortunately.
Oh, he
So,
did?
yeah.
That sucks.
Fantastic drummer, though. Yeah. I know people might not agree with me on this one, but I thought Matt Sorum would probably do it pretty well too.
I like Matt a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, Eric Singer, who played with Kiss, you know, Kiss Unplugged, if you ever listen to the drums on that album, Eric Singer is a great drummer. He played with Alice Cooper, Jakey Lee's Badlands, that first album. He's got that very 70s heavy Bonham type of playing. Not a lot of people are familiar with Eric Singer, but he's a fantastic drummer. He was the drummer in Kiss up until the final tour, actually. He's a great drummer. I like him a lot.
Brian Tishy as well. I think he could possibly do it because he's a big Bonham guy and loves Alex Van Halen and whatnot. You know, he's played Whitesnake and Billy Idol, everyone. He's played with Zakk Wylde. He's a phenomenal drummer. And that Pride and Glory album, actually, that Brian plays on, he plays a lot like Alex on that, I think. Yeah, but, you know, I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on some of the topics I brought up there, but I think if you go and have a listen to the audiobook after you've read the book, it's
Yeah, I
It's
heard a
pretty,
few chapters, Brad. Sorry, I skipped over that. I heard a few chapters that Alex put out, and it was very touching. You hear the emotion in his voice at certain parts. That's why I
yeah,
want to do the audiobook, because when you read it, you don't get that perspective of his
yeah.
emotion, right?
Mm,
Even when he did that, he did the town hall in L.A. He got choked up a couple of times, and he actually looked to the woman Ariel, like he was talking about Ed, and he catches himself, and you can see he's holding back like emotion and tear. Like he looks at her as if to say, like, next question or something. But
yeah.
it's
He,
still a lot of emotion. It's raw. And I want to hear that on an audiobook.
you'll pick that up. He even giggles a couple of times at certain things, some lighthearted stuff, and probably takes him back a little bit. So it was pretty, But I think I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on like a follow-up book or something like that for the big chunk of Van Halen's history that he's kind of just put on ice. It's not like it's not even relevant.
Yeah. I'll comment on that just from what I know, and things change. I'm surprised that this book even came out in the first place, but I think there are just some issues, which is kind of why it just stopped there. Because I mean, it was unusual to me that it was kind of this timeline historical book, and then it just stops at a certain point and
Right.
doesn't acknowledge. And unfortunately, there's big chunks of, I know it's brothers and it's his relationship with his brother, but there's big chunks of what was important to Ed that are missing. As someone who interviewed Ed a lot during that period, that's the big void out there. The birth of Wolfgang and just what that meant to him, and maybe he could have related when they were both fathers. He kind of mentions that you kind of have to, you have to kind of live and you have this responsibility and everything as a father. But I would have liked a lot more of that. How did becoming fathers change their life? How did becoming a father change Ed? Because sadly, there was a period there where Wolfgang was at this young, vulnerable age, and Ed was in horrible shape. And I know that's a real painful thing to go into. I don't even like to think back to that era when I was around. But I would have liked to have seen that. I would have, again, I know that the very end of Ed's life is a very personal and very painful thing, but it just felt so sudden. Just like it just kind of, the book kind of goes and it ends, and it's just like, I didn't feel the proper send off.
Right.
To Ed.
Like closure for us as a reader to get through everything.
Yeah,
right?
it felt very open-ended, and maybe that would be something. Maybe as he gets criticism, maybe he could think about possibly at least addressing that. I do know that he's had problems with Sammy. Obviously, the Red Book did not help matters at all. But Dave hasn't exactly been, Mr. Nice Guy either about a lot of stuff. He got into a battle, particularly with Wolfgang, over the last two records, the live album and A Different Kind of Truth, that got prolonged for about a year, and everybody just bared the brunt of it. The fans, Wolfgang, even Dave himself, was foregoing royalties over a little pissy match that they had going on.
Right.
Because of the fact that Wolfgang was collecting 50% of the royalties as opposed to his 25% share.
Right.
Because he had Ed's share because Ed died. Once it came up to re-up, it's all of a sudden, well, now Wolfgang gets this, but it's like, yeah, but it's still Ed's share.
It's Ed's share, and it goes to the trust. It goes to the family. Like,
Yeah.
it would never go to Dave. He wanted it to be split evenly with him and Al, and and,
three,
and Wolf.
33,
ways.
33, 33, three ways,
Right.
And it's just like, well, then you're kind of really, you're cheating, you're taking more, and you're cheating Ed out of his share,
And Ed wrote all the music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's very clear when you read, through Alex's voice anyway, that he's still dirty at Dave, but he's very forgiving with Dave, but he's not forgiving with Sammy.
Not forgiving Sammy, and Gary Sharon just doesn't even fucking exist.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, I know that wasn't the greatest period for fans with the band and everything like that, but it was part of their history.
I was thinking about that, Chris, coming up and reading through the book, and then I kind of just devised in my mind that those three guys came up together like from the ashes, right, from nothing. So I think that.
What about Mike Anthony too?
Yeah,
just
and they treated Mikey, very badly over the whole course of the past few decades.
Yeah.
And even in the book, I was disappointed the little they mentioned and how they kind of discounted what Mikey. Even like in one part, it said Mikey's bass playing was thin in the beginning, and his voice was great, but it was really Edge that harmonized, that made the sound. It kind of like discounting Mikey a lot. Al did, and I kind of didn't like that much. But you're exactly right, Chris.
It's his opinion, his book. He can say it, but we don't have to agree with it. So.
Yeah, no, I know.
Exactly, Chris. And we're going to do a spoiler alert here if you're watching on a replay and you are Sammy Hagar fans. The reference to Sammy Hagar only gets mentioned in relation to Montrose and Ted wanting to sack David Lee Roth when they were recording the first album as their vocalist.
Yep.
And then they mentioned him as the show they did in Anaheim together, which was not called Summerfest.
Yes.
If you want to give me a chance, I don't want to criticize the book too much, but there is a laundry list of factual errors that do need to be addressed.
Chris, this is the perfect time. This is the perfect time for us Van Halen fans. There's 34 of yous here in the house and the party. So
you got your copies of the book, and I don't have the page numbers, but
so we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, and a lot of us know Brad posted a post about a week ago, didn't he, Chris?
Yeah, well, I don't want to talk about that just yet. I want to just talk about. I just want to talk about the factual stuff because I'm a historian. I'm a biographer, and these are just cold hard facts. And unfortunately, I'm going to sound like an egotistical jerk here, but it would have been nice to have somebody who bought a Van Halen album at some point in their life, or went to a concert or something like that, or whatever. Write the book with Alex so they could catch these things and do fact checking and so on and so forth, because unfortunately there's a lot of stuff in there that's sloppy. And it starts very much in the beginning when they come to America, and it says, unfortunately, this has been repeated. It's been repeated in the New York Times, it's been repeated on NPR, and it's going to become canon here. And I'm Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill, trying to say, no, people, look at the dates, because I can cite it like at the top of my head. This is how much of a fucking nerd I am. Okay. Van Halen, the Van Halen came from Nijmegen, to say it in the proper Dutch pronunciation. They left there for America on February 22nd, 1962. Now, when was Eddie Van Halen born? He was born January 26, 1955, right? So it says that he was 6 when he left for America. Well, guess what? Ed had his 7th birthday on January 26, 1962. So he was 7. He was 7 when they left for America. He was 7 when they arrived in America. So right there, that's wrong. Al says that he had a Teisco. He had the Teisco guitar. We all know that guitar with 4 pickups. We had that picture of Ed and Eugenia there, or however you say it, proud little boy with his guitar. Ed bought that Teisco. Ed, started off on a nylon string flamenco guitar, because that's what Alex was taking, was flamenco lessons. It was a nylon string acoustic. So the Teisco was not Alex's. The Teisco was Ed's, and Ed bought that guitar. So that's wrong. They talk about, Ed said in an interview with Guitar World magazine in 1978, well, there wasn't a Guitar World magazine in 1978. Guitar World started in 1980. They say that Jazz Obrecht was a writer for Guitar World magazine. He never wrote a single word for Guitar World magazine. Guitar player, that's it. Says that Mark Stone died 10 days before Ed died. Mark Stone died 10 days after Ed died. I mean, okay, I'm getting to the stuff. He talks about tapping. Now, read Greg Renoff's incredible chapter in Van Halen Rising about the origin of Ed's tapping, because I've independently gone down that path and done my research, and it basically corresponds completely with what Greg already did before me. Ed even told Stephen Rosen that he started tapping after they stopped playing at Gazzari's. And it fits the timeline. But he makes it sound like it was much earlier than that. And we know that it wasn't, because we have all these photographs, we have all these live recordings, that don't show Ed with his fingers up on the board. You don't hear it in anything. You don't even hear it on the demos that they recorded in April of 1978. They say that Van Halen played Perkins Palace in Pasadena, never played there. They talk about a Nils Lofgren show in Santa Monica Civic, before they got signed. No, that was March 18th. They got signed and discovered, the 2nd of February. So that they did do the Santana show, but they didn't just go. It's like I said, that would have been one hell of a weekend. Well, you opened for Santana, you did 3 nights at the Whiskey, and you opened for Nils Lofgren. Well, no, Nils Lofgren was after they got signed, which brings me up to another point. The Ramones. They did not play that show in 77 with the Ramones. Yes, there's a flyer out there. Jeff Goebel just had, what's his name? What's the guy's name? Lauren Molinar on the show The Dogs, who played that show. And he said, nope, Van Halen canceled out of that gig. So Alex remembers playing that show, allegedly. I don't know if he remembers or how that came down. I wasn't there. I wasn't the fly on the wall. But they did not play that show with the Ramones. The only time Van Halen played with the Ramones, am I getting into the weeds here? Am I a Van Halen nerd or what? Okay. But the only time that the Van Halen played with the Ramones was Halloween, 1978 in Atlanta. And they were sandwiched in between Van Halen and Black Sabbath. So it wasn't a blowout. It was really a heavy metal blowout, and the Ramones were the fucking freak show. So it was exactly turned topsy-turvy. It wasn't Van Halen in the middle of a bunch of bands. It was the Ramones in the middle of a bunch of fucking metal bands, So there was that. The one that really kind of got me was talking about the Frankenstein. And on the first, they're talking about the first album and all this other stuff. And then they mention the reflectors on the back and the front pickup. And we all know when that happened. It happened later. It wasn't on the first album. Did the ghostwriter even look at the picture? Does she even know what a pickup is? So that's wrong or misleading. There's a quote where they talk about recording the demos, and Ed mentions Jamie's crying. Well, that was taken completely out of context, because Ed, I know what Ed was talking about, because I was talking to him about that. And he was talking about, we recorded these songs and Jamie's crying. And he was talking about doing overdubs. And that was on the debut album, not the demos.
Right.
So that was taken completely out of context. The Anaheim Stadium Parachute Show was never called Summerfest. Yes, there's these bootleg T-shirts out there that say Summerfest, but if you've seen the ticket stubs and the newspaper ads and all the promotional stuff from back then, never called Summerfest. The Trojan Rubber Company photos that are in the photo section, it says it was 1971. That was taken, I think that was one of the guys whose party it was or something had posted on social media, and it got recycled by a few people as 71. But there's no effing way that the kid that you're seeing in those photos, that's Eddie Van Halen, is 16 years old. He's a 14, 13-year-old little kid. It was 1968, 1969. And if you've seen the rest of the photos, you see Ed with the 12-string Univox jamming later at that party. And you know what? He got rid of that guitar in 69 when he got his gold top Les Paul. So that's off by 2 years. The graduation photos are off by 2 years. It was not 69 and 71. It was 71 and 73. There's a whiskey flyer. Oh boy. This is one that's just kind of like, it's a what the fuck moment. I don't even know who put this thing in there. Okay. Let's see that. Okay. Fucking Nerdville, right? That's my Post-its. That's which we will get into that stuff, but there's a flyer. Where is that section? Because I think it's the second section. Well, anyways, there's a flyer, and it shows whiskey spelled WHISKEY, and it was actually a sticker that Live Nation did in 2017. And if you look at the side of the thing, you actually see copyright 2017. It's like a completely bogus marketing thing that they sold online. It had nothing to do with the whiskey. They misspelled whiskey because they didn't want to get sued by the actual Whiskey A Go-Go. So why this piece of recent merchandise is in there as some type of memento from their club days in 77, it's just effing bizarre. So that's the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
I'll leave it at that, and that was just for my quick first read through that I caught. So I'm going to bitch here. It would have been nice, and I would have done this for $500, $1,000, maybe, you know, to just throw it past somebody, throw it past Greg Renoff, you know, or somebody, you know, fact check this stuff, because this becomes common knowledge. And as we saw with the NPR and the NY Times thing, they're out there saying like, Ed was 6 when he came to America. Well, factually, no, he wasn't. He was factually 7.
Right.
So, and, you know, I'm an asshole about this type of thing because this is my fucking life. It has been for the last, you know, actually since I first saw Van Halen in 1978, but professionally, it's been that way for the last 28 years. You know, 30 years, actually 32. I can't remember when I started working for Guitar Player magazine in the early 90s, but it's been my life to get this shit right. And this stuff just rolls my fucking rock down to the bottom of the hill, and I'm Sisyphus pushing it back up again, fighting an uphill battle because I don't have the exposure that this book has, you know? So, and it's always going to be a losing battle because we're fighting the internet and all this other stuff and all of these things. But here was a perfect opportunity to get the shit right. You know
what it is? There's a bigger picture, Chris, and I agree with everything you said 100% wholeheartedly. But I think where we are as a society, but just look at current events in the news and anything you see in the media, nothing is factual. It's like they've lowered our standards so much that no one fact checks anything. Everyone misrepresents everything, and people are just okay with it. Not people like us or you, but like no one does their homework. It's very sloppy. No one does their research.
No one does their homework. No, I fully agree.
And it's been accepted, right? Because it's just what it is. And it's.
I mean, I don't want to get off on my great overlords across the pond, but I see that all the time online, you know, and it bugs the heck out of me. I mean, it's really. I was playing it at Madison Square Garden, man. Eddie Van Halen is in the pit watching my every move, and he got tapping from me.
Right.
Here's news, Ace. Eddie was not. Ed never saw you play at Madison Square Garden because on February 18th, when you first played at Madison Square Garden, Van Halen was at the Pasadena Civic Center playing the first iteration of the Frankie guitar that he had the first time we ever saw the body. You know, February 18th, 1977. That's the first time Kiss ever played Madison Square Garden, and it's well documented. There's even a bootleg.
You know, I take anything Ace Frehley says with a grain of salt.
I know. He's
I know where he is half the time, right? But
I have interviewed Ace, so I know.
Yeah.
It's
and
just,
I'm a big Ace fan. I love Kiss. I love Ace, but he's shot. But
but Brian May was saying a similar thing about, you know, it's late, and it's like, well, News of the World didn't come out in the United States, and England for that matter didn't come out until, you know, November of 77. Well, by that point, Van Halen 1 was in the can. You know, Eruption was recorded September 8th, 1977. You know, so it was already done and in the can.
May to get that stuff. No way.
You know, and all these people are coming out and saying like, oh, well, Ed got tapping for me. Ed got tapping for me. No, read Greg Renoff's book. You know, read that chapter in Van Halen Rising if you really want to know where Ed's tapping came from and how it developed and when it happened. You know, awesome job, Greg. You know, we need more people like Greg Renoff out there.
Great book. Great book. Van Halen Rising. Great book.
Yeah, great book.
Great job.
You know,
but like you said earlier, Chris, I don't blame Alex, but I do. He should have had the right people work on this and do their homework. I blame the publisher. I blame anyone working on doing the fact checking and the publishing and the copywriting on that stuff.
I agree.
He should have been more involved. He should have been more involved with that.
Alex is not a writer. He's not a professional writer. He doesn't. I deal with this stuff, you know, and you know that's why, unfortunately, you know, I will bring up the elephant in the room. And, you know, Brad went off on social media. I'm not even on fucking Facebook. I basically hate Facebook, and I just am on Instagram, and that's about it. So he goes out behind my, you know, I point out to him because I'm reading the book and I'm enjoying, and I was really honored to see our names mentioned twice in the first chapter. And that was really cool. But the more I'm looking at it, I'm going like, this is really familiar. This is familiar. I've seen this. I've seen this. And I'm picking up a copy of Eruption. I'm going like, wait a second. Holy shit. Holy fit. Holy fucking shit. Holy fucking shit. Holy fucking shit. Okay. I used up an entire brand new pad of Post-its and started ripping them in half because I couldn't find another pad. And it's not just Brad and me. but it's Steve Rosen.
Mhm.
It's other writers. It's some guy who wrote an interview with the band in 1988 in some Japanese publication. It goes on and on and on. You'll see, like, said to a journalist, or won't even say anything at all. And people don't understand this. And I'm going to seem like a dick, but first of all, I'm just going to preface this. Brad was not supposed to go public with this. I'm very pissed that he did, because it really should be between us and the publisher and the editor and whoever. And we're not looking for money. We just want credit where credit's due. But
Sure.
This is our work. This is what we do for a living.
Right.
And, we want people not necessarily to buy the book. I mean, we're not going to make any more money off of Eruption. That money's, we've made what we made, and that's it. And we're never going to see another fucking penny. So it's not about money. For me, it's about people. There's these quotes. Read the quote about Ed talking about Jamie's crying and realize he's talking about the first album being recorded, not the demos. Read them in their proper context and everything like that. Give people a pointer at least. And this is what you're supposed to do. Nonfiction, historical, just nonfiction writers in general, but especially historical writers and biographers, we are at the bottom of the food chain when it comes to copyright protection. Because if you want to steal our stuff, if you want to steal our work, all you have to do is put an attribution somewhere in your publication. You don't even have to put it right next to the actual quote. It's nice if you can do a footnote and say, like, hey, this came from here. You can do what Kevin Dodds did in the back of his Eddie Van Halen thing and just put it in a big, huge laundry list in the back, biography, whatever, and list it there. And that's fine. It takes a little bit more work for people to line them up, but whatever. At least you're acknowledging the sources, and that's all you have to do legally. Right. But when you take that work and put it into a book and you don't mention it, it becomes a little bit of an issue. And it crosses the line from fair use to something that begins with a P. We didn't even accuse anybody of that, and I'm not really accusing of that. I think it's just the writer who was hired to do this, the ghostwriter, basically didn't do her due diligence, and didn't do right by other writers like her. Because it's, but some people have brought up online because, Brad fucking stirred the pot and created this maelstrom and turned a bunch of people against us when we're trying to help you people. We're on your side. We're fans too. This ghostwriter, I don't think she's a fan, and I don't think she'll ever listen to Van Halen ever again once this project's done and your check's been cashed, So, but I'm, I put on Van Halen almost every fucking day. I've got a fucking copy, built for me by the wonderful Donnie Ward of Ed's, 1977 Ibanez Destroyer. That's, I'm a fanboy. I'll admit it. I'm a fucking Van Halen fanboy, and I will be to the day I die. And I'm looking out for you other fanboys, and I'm looking out for you other casual fans and everything like that. So anyways, quotes. People brought up this whole thing of quotes. Oh, you can't own a quote. Well, bullshit. You can own a quote, because why? Interviewing is a skill. People don't realize what goes into it. I'm going to justify my existence here a little bit. I'm going to go on a little bit of a pulpit. So if you guys want to go grab a beer, whatever, step off. If you want to learn about the ins and outs of the publishing business, listen. When I do an interview with anybody, with Ed or whoever, especially with Ed, I do my fucking research. That's days of time. I want to make sure I know what I'm doing. I want to make sure I'm not wasting his time. I don't want to show him, go, Eddie Van Halen, what's your favorite color? I don't want to do that. I want to say, like, how did you do that solo? How did you make your guitars? How did you do this? How did you do that? So there's a lot of work behind it. I don't go and show up and just turn on a tape recorder and say, go. I have to have a conversation. I have to learn sometimes when people are being evasive, how to pull stuff out of them. It's skills you develop. I've been doing this for 30 years for guitar magazines, and I was doing it for another 10 years before that. And this is what happens. On the legal sense, okay, I do the interview. It gets published. It gets published in a magazine. It gets published in a book. That's a copyrighted product. That's like putting out an album. Okay. And me, as the author and my publishing company, we own that copyright. That is ours. And again, because we're the bottom feeders in the food chain here, our copyright protection doesn't say that we're due to any pennies or money and stuff like that. We got to buy Alpo to get by. We've got to go to the 99-cent store to buy socks. But anybody can copy that stuff as long as they attribute it. It's perfectly legal, fine. So anybody out there who wants to do that, if you want to steal shit, just make sure you put the attributions in. You'll be free. You'll be fine. And we didn't go after Al for any money or anything like that. That wasn't the thing. We just wanted credit where credit is due. And that's it. And it shouldn't have been public. It should have been just between us. But I do want to bring up an example, okay? People say like, well, it's still Ed's quote. It's his words. You can't own his words, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, Ed can say the same words to people. And that's true in that respect. If he does an interview, it just happened to me perfectly with Balance. The first time I interviewed Ed was for Guitar Player, and Tom Bajor interviewed him for Guitar World. And I'm comparing when the two issues came out, a month apart, and they came out first. Guitar World came out first, and I'm reading mine, and I was kind of bummed when I saw the Guitar World thing. It's like, oh, Ed said that exact same story to me. Not the exact same words, but he said that story to me. But the way to put it into context is so people can understand it in a musical sense. It's like when Ed played on Beat It. He played his guitar solo. That's Eddie Van Halen all the way. It's his guitar, it's his note, it's his setup, it's his thing. But you know who owns the rights to that? Michael Jackson, because he's playing on Michael Jackson's record. Al can't take Eddie's solo and put it on a Van Halen record. Now, Ed could play that solo all over again, but unfortunately, Ed's not here. So that's kind of the ins and outs of it. I can go on and on. It's like sampling. What would happen to us with sampling? And it'd be nice service for the people out there to just get a pointer to us. It's really not about selling books in my case. It's about just people getting the knowledge. If you're curious, go a little bit further. Hey, there's this book out there called Eruption, and it's 60-70% Eddie Van Halen in his own words. And you know what? Eddie died. He never had a chance to sit down and do a biography. But you know what? He sat down with Brad. He sat down with me. He sat down with Steve Rosen, who we licensed out his previous interviews, and we paid him a very hefty, generous sum. We didn't have to, but we're bros. We feel like it's just the right thing to do. We did the same thing with Vic Garbarini. So anybody who wants to shit on us, including Eddie Anderson and stuff, I'm sorry, dudes, but we're not bad guys. We're not looking to get rich. We didn't go after them to raise a penny or anything like that. We just want to do right by Ed. Because if you're criticizing Eruption, you're criticizing Eddie Van Halen. Because why? It's his story in his words. Right. With a little bit of historical background to fill in the gaps. And that's what it is. So there we go.
Thank you, Chris.
Well said, Chris. For setting the story straight for most who don't know, most of us have read all these books and we see all the comparisons and the derivative of where, like, oh, I read that before. Where did I see that? Oh, yeah. I read that in Chris's book.
And it's, I don't even want it to be thought of as Chris's book. This is Eddie's book. I think my job, early on in my career, I was at a NAMM show at the Guitar Player magazine booth. And some guy came up to me and said, like, who are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm Chris Gill. It's like, oh, what have you done? And I rattled off a few stories and interviews I had done. He's like, oh, cool. I read those. I don't read bylines. It's like, good, because it's not about me. It's about the other guy. That's my job. I'm supposed to be invisible, and if I'm invisible and people don't know who the fuck I am, good. I've done my job. I would rather in the book that it was Eruption mentioned and didn't mention my name or Brad's name at all. I mean, Brad may feel differently about that, but I'd be absolutely fine if he just mentioned, Ed said in Eruption conversations with Eddie Van Halen, he didn't even mention our names.
Right.
Because
it needs to be referenced. It needs to be referenced and it needs to be footnoted.
Well,
in the back, right?
Obviously,
Mikey.
He liked the book and he agreed with it because he used it so profusely, as we mentioned, 40 major times that I can count. And there's actually little incidences, even like word phrases and stuff in there that were used. So obviously Alex agreed with it because I think that Ariel picked up that stuff herself, just picked up the book and just, referenced it and whatever. But, obviously Alex didn't say like, I don't want that in the book, or whatever, or that's not what happened, or whatever, so obviously we got it right. And that's a great compliment, and he doesn't even have to come out and say it because what he showed me that it's, as they say in the business, show, don't tell. Well, he showed me that by including so much of our stuff in there that he agreed with this. So I think good job done. But now I wish people would read it because it's like, and don't read it and don't read Alex's book, read them both. Right. Read Alex's side, read Ed's side.
Chris, I just want to jump in and say something, if that's okay. And Mikey, you mentioned a good point. One of the the things that we hear and we started this channel about was Van Halen. And to get together, guys, and celebrate our experiences and our love, Mikey, and passion for the music, you know, with guys halfway around the world. But also there's a byline to that too, John, because we wanted to, as organic fans, try and get the stories correct, try and get the dates and, you know, as organic fans correct, because it was those little bits of information that mattered to Van Halen fans. When you've got guys, Mikey, arguing about a scratch on the 5150 guitar or whether there's blue paint under the Eruption guitar, Brad, you know, these kind of bits of information do matter in the long run. So if you think they don't, folks, well, they certainly do. So we appreciate, and I just want to sort of, you know, back up what guys in the chat are saying, Chris. You know, thank you for giving us this opportunity that we can get these dates and this bit of information correct. Because when Volume 2 or the reprint comes out, Brad, that you mentioned, hopefully they'll go through and correct all that, John.
They're not going to correct it all, but at least there will be an attribution. I mean, that's all we got. And it was solved very quickly. You know, that's the best thing.
Okay, or an attribution. And I just want to make one more point before I open it up. And again, Mikey, you said, you know, in this age of not fact-checking and not fact-checking, you know, we've become accommodated to the fact that people are dumb and thick as shit. And we're supposed to accept that. No, we don't, because the internet, John and Brad and Chris, was about getting the information right in the first place.
Right.
True.
Well, it's you people over here on the margins, you know, that are coming. You people are the ones who keep me honest, you know.
Right.
And, you know, Alan Garber, hey, if you're still there, you know, we talk about shit all the time, you know, offline.
Sure.
And you know, John and I talk, and Mikey, you and I talk, you know, and Brad, I don't talk with you enough. I'd like to talk with you more, but you're a great guy. And Andrew, you're a great guy. You're all, the whole community. I love you people. You know, and that's been the greatest thing for me out of this book. That's even better than the money that I made, which wasn't a lot, you know, it was good, but it wasn't a lot. It was meeting all you folks, because I was kind of isolated working, you know, at these magazines, and I didn't know about you people, you know, and this is the great thing, is that it brought us all together. And I do this stuff for you people, you know, and I do it for myself too, because I'm a fanboy, like I said, you know, but it's really my responsibility to all of you to get this stuff right, because you're going to tell me about the pain, or you're going to open my eyes to something that I might have missed or whatever. And it leads me down a path, and that opens up something else. And then we have more to talk about for hours on shows like this, you know, where we all get together as a community, and that's all good and healthy. But, you know, but the whole ownership thing, it's just, you know, I mean, talking about the society thing, it's like the internet has been great, but it's also been a plague. You know, and it didn't really start, I'm sure it was going on before, but Napster really kind of just pushed things into to overdrive, you know, where people all of a sudden didn't value music, you know, and people were just swapping music for free. We see images swapped around and posted and whatever. And that's fine as long as you're not making money or taking money out of someone's pocket. You know, unfortunately, I mean, we saw what happened with our good friend John Burgess, you know, Johnny B Guitars, and those wonderful, you know, Frankenstein videos that he did, and they got taken down because a photographer who I won't name because I respect him, you know, said, like, you're using my photos and I'm blocking you. And that did our community a big disservice, you know, and you know, and maybe I'm sounding like a hypocrite for saying that, but, you know, well, John wasn't making any money off of this stuff. But, you know, and in a way, the photographer was kind of right. You know, it's just, hey, I bet if, you know, unfortunately, John never got to talk with him. I tried to be a mediator and get the two of them together and just say, what if he just gives you credit? I mean, I just did that with this guy, Simon Alkin, who did this video that you guys probably have seen about, you know, Eddie Van Halen's guitars in the beginning. He did a really nice job of it, young guy, you know, but he came to me and said, like, hey, you know, can I get permission? You know, I've got this stuff from Rosen and Obrecht, you know, from their, I want to put this in Ed's words, you know, on this video. And he seemed like a really good, upstanding guy, you know, and everything like that. And I kind of thought about it because I'm always reticent to this stuff because I've seen a lot of hypey crap out there and clickbaity shit. You know, it's like, I don't know if I looked and I said, well, you know, he seems all right. He seems to want to do the right thing. So I gave him some of my audio that's never been heard before by people. And yeah, he may monetize and he may make some money, but it's not going to be a lot. And I don't care because he credited me, you know, and he credited the book more than anything. So people can, again, they can go and they can dig a little bit deeper, and it helps the community out, because the other thing he let me do was fact check his video.
Right.
So it's like, good.
Mm.
He was open to having me fact check it so we could get it right, because you know what? That helps me out in the end. It helps the community out in the end.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff I want out there. And that's what I want us all to do. It's just, that's, so these people who are attacking, I haven't really gotten any attacks, at least, because I'm pretty buried and everything like that. But, I know Brad's gotten attacked, and people have copied shit and sent me stuff and all that. And it's like, yeah, and there's always going to be people out there who don't get it, and they're not going to see what, the forest for the trees, basically. But look, I'm on your side. I'm a fan. We're not doing this for money. We're not doing this to sell books. It's about the truth. It's about not a different kind of truth, but the one and only truth, the truth with a capital T.
Right.
That's what we care about.
I like what you did there, Chris.
Yeah. I think you, Chris, you hit on a lot of great points. Just to wrap this all up, like, it's what you guys do. It's like John Burgess up in Canada with Johnny B's guitars, and what you and Brad do, and everyone. It's two things. It isn't life changing, like you said, the monetary aspect of it. It's not why you're doing it, and it's not life changing, but you're a historian, and it's very important to get these facts out correctly and accurately. Same with Johnny B. And, he's passing this on to generations beyond us, right? And we're very, very tight community here, but it's passion projects, it's labor of love, it's stuff that you purely do because that's what you do. And I hate when I see things get taken down off YouTube and information that we all want and need get taken down and struck. But to your point, credit needs to be credited, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to use someone's image or likeness or quotes from a book, it needs to be attributed, it needs to be referenced, it needs to be credited. So as long as everyone plays by those rules,
it's playing by the rules, and it's just like, it's all just playing together. And it's just like, this guy Simon Alkin reached out to me, and that was like, wow, someone reached out to me. I just didn't stumble across this and find it.
Right.
And I really appreciated that, and and he was surprised at all the work I did for him, because I said, here, let me help you publicize this. And I contacted the guys at guitarworld.com, and I contacted my buddies over at the Van Halen news desk and said, like, hey, can you put an item out about this? And he's like, what are you doing this for me for? It's like, because you're telling the truth, because you're making my job easier, because you're doing the fan community a service.
a major
And you
service.
asked for our permission. And you are a rare person out there. And I wish more people knew that. I wish, just let's be good people to each other.
Right.
Let's not be so concerned about making a buck and everything and monetizing our YouTube and whatever. And let's share the information, and just ask permission when you're using something.
That's the key word. We all want access to this information just to learn and to educate ourselves about the history
it feels like a betrayal when you just, again, it felt very strange for me to just read all this stuff and say, like, where's the attribution? And I went to the back to see, and I mean, okay, I'm going to take Alex to the mat, because it must have been his own words, but he kind of dismissed us, and I didn't feel it was fair. Where he says, like, he talks about Noah Monk's book, and he talks about David Lee Roth's book, and he talks about the Ted Templeman book, and he doesn't mention Greg Renoff anywhere in reference to Ted Templeman's book. But he mentions Ted Templeman's book. He mentions the title of it, so people can go and find out because they see it and it's been selling. Great, but it's just, people are reading it. People are curious. They want to see the full story from Ted Templeman, see what does Alex disagree with about, because he said he disagreed with a lot of that book. But he says, like, concerning I'll have to read it. I'll have to read it here because I don't want to get it wrong. He says, oh gosh, it's late and my eyes are not doing so well. Okay, let's see. Okay, he says he disagrees with his former collaborators on all sorts of things, blah, blah, blah. I have mixed feelings about the books by all of the Van Halenologists. Mixed feelings, because they weren't actually there. But I read them all just to remind myself of everything Ed and I said over the years. Sometimes whether he goes on, whatever. But that's okay. My biggest issue with that, first of all, is that he lumps us all into there. And we know there's some people out there that have done books, that are just, they are leeches and parasites and whatever, and they have never ever met Eddie Van Halen. They have never met Alex. They've never met Mike or Sammy or Dave or Wolfgang. Well, I've met all those people. And Alex, was I not there?
You were there, Chris.
Was I not there with Ed, at 5150 for days at a time, going over 60, 70 of his guitars and going on the beach at Valerie's house and doing a photo shoot, and following you guys to Atlanta and hanging out and looking at all the gear behind the thing and going to the room at the Four Seasons the next day and sitting down with Ed and Wolfgang and doing Wolfgang's first ever interview and cover story ever. And as a fan, going to 20, 25, 30 shows from 1978 until 2015 and having attended every single damn tour that they ever did, and talking with Michael Anthony and talking with Steve Lukather, whose quotes that I did exclusively for the book that you also used in your book and didn't attribute, and talking with Gary Sharon and talking with Ray Daniels and talking with all these other people that were there. We were there. They were there. That's a really cheap shot. To
Chris,
fire.
here's a great point from Tanner. You were more mentally there than Alex because he wasn't sober.
Okay, this is a great story. It's a sad story. I want to tell you because I can say, it obviously shows in the book that we were Ed's memory bank. We were his flipping, 3 terabyte hard drive, basically, of Van Halen memories, because it just shows in so much of the book and how it's even structured. And you can even, I don't want to get into the woods here, but it's like, I was going through it and it's going like, I'm going through and it's almost like page by page. It's just matching up with our book. And that's what kind of, it just blew my mind a bit. And again, I at the same time, I'm kind of humbled and proud that we got it right because he didn't dispute any of that shit. But, oh God, the last time I dealt with Ed, it was 2019, March, April, and we were going to do, and this was part of the whole thing with the book because Brad and I were planning this book well before Ed died, but we were going to do an interview on the 40th anniversary of the Van Halen 2 album. And I reached out to Ed and said, hey, we want to dig into, deep dive like I did with Ed on the 1984 album. I want to do a deep dive with you onto the making of Van Halen 2. And Ed's like, well, Chris, to be honest, I don't remember a single fucking thing that we did back then. So can you do me a favor and write down about 30 or 40 questions and write a little brief history for me to check out? And maybe that will jog my memory. And I'm like, sure thing, Ed. And I did it. And then I took off with my daughter, my wife, and we went to Japan for 3 weeks. And I came back, and sadly, Janie had sent me an email I missed because I was in Japan, and, time is exactly opposite. And I'm eating sushi and ramen and, doing all kinds of kooky stuff that you do in Japan. But I come back and it's like, sadly, we have to cancel. They never canceled on me ever before. Sadly, I have to cancel, and we'll contact you when Ed's ready to do this. Well, that day never came because Ed was sick, but I mean, there's your perfect example. This is what I do. I had to be Eddie Van Halen's memory because he couldn't remember, and I'm hoping that he would remember, but I had to go, Ed, Van Halen 2. Oh, dance the night away. What do you know? This is a great nugget. Look at that big nugget. I have to be the miner excavating Eddie Van Halen's brain for stuff, but I wasn't there. So what do I fucking know? But again, it's just, and that's, I guess, when it comes back to some of my criticism about the thing is, gosh, Alex, were you there? Because you relied so heavily on us. That's the thing. These Post-its I have are not just our stuff. It's all these other sources and everything that just wasn't attributed. So I can't go back. And the funny thing is I found some of these articles. I found that 1988 or 89 Japanese thing. I go, oh, this is a kind of cool interview. And I'm reading that now, so if I'd had a footnote, it would have been a lot easier for me. I didn't have to go on Google and search up these terms and everything like that and find it, And some stuff isn't Googleable. Some of the stuff isn't online. So I'm going to have to dig a little bit more for those things. But yeah, it's just, you know, we weren't there, but a lot of us were. Steve Rosen was there for a good chunk.
Right.
You know, Jazz Obricht was there for certain moments, you know, and everything. Yeah, we weren't on the road with you guys 24/7, you know, like Noah Monk or something like that, you know, but how much time did Ted Templeman really spend with you guys?
Right.
You know, he made records with you, but you guys did those pretty damn quick.
Yeah. And
You
and
know?
Ted was working with numerous big bands like the Doobies and other folks.
Oh,
too,
that's another
Montrose.
thing. I actually have to give Greg Renner credit because that's another factual error in the book. Andrew, you should know this. You'll probably notice it when you see it, but it mentions in the book that Ted Templeman had previously worked with Eric Clapton. You know, they're talking about 77, 78, you know, when they're making the first album. And it's like, when did Ted Templeman actually work with Eric Clapton? Behind the Sun in the 80s.
Yeah, 86.
Yeah. So it's like, we know that as fucking guitar nerds.
The timelines. You know? The timelines are wrong.
The timelines are completely wrong. There's all kinds of stuff messed up, you know, and that stuff may seem a little thing because it's an Eric Clapton detail, but it's still like, it matters in the big scheme of things.
Right. Oh, no, well, it's a big detail because when you consider how many articles did we read over the years, guys, where where Eddie's talking about Clapton being a major influence on his guitar playing, you know, and he even corrected the woman. We've mentioned this many times on the show. He even corrected the woman at the Smithsonian where she tried to say or push, you know, Hendrix being his main influence, and he corrected her. Said,
okay,
no.
I have to interject here, and this is a fucking deep guitar nerd thing. But I have to bring this point up because you guys are going to love this. Okay. Talks about the legendary Marshall, right? The Rose Palace Marshall. There's a thing in there.
Yes. Yeah.
And the legendary the Rose Palace Marshall. Alex talks about like what a great thing it was. It was the house amp at the Rose Palace, and all these big bands played through it. Jimi Hendrix played through it. Well,
he did.
Jimi Hendrix didn't play through that amp. It's a 1968 amp. The Rose Palace only booked shows from 1969 during 1969 and 1970. So there's a very diverse and good list of artists who played at the Rose Palace, but Jimi Hendrix wasn't one of them because at that point he was huge. And where was he playing? He was playing the LA Forum in 1969. So he wasn't playing the concrete bunker Rose Palace. You know who did play at the Rose Palace? Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And you know what? I have a fucking photo of John Paul Jones on stage with the Marshall behind him. And
you showed me that photo. Yes.
During that tour, yes, I put that on. I showed you that.
Yes.
During that tour, they were borrowing gear, you know, and Ed had some of these Rickenbacker transonic amps. But if you look at those photos, you see them in Seattle, they got different backlines and stuff like that.
Right.
And John Paul Jones wasn't playing through Marshalls. You know who was? Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
Jimmy Page played through that Marshall, not Jimi Hendrix. And you know what? We were talking about it earlier. This line, this commonality, this influence, this inspiration of Led Zeppelin on Van Halen. And here, the legendary Marshall was played, was touched, blessed, heavens above by Jimmy Page.
Well, Chris, that's another thing in the book he mentions, Alex. Now, Alex says he was 16 when he saw Zeppelin at the LA Forum in Page. If he was 16, it would have been, he was born in 53, would have been like 66 or 67.
Yeah, it's not possible.
They didn't play LA Forum 67.
There wasn't even a Led Zeppelin
They
then.
weren't even a Led Zeppelin until 69.
So that's
that stuff's all over the book. It's all
that's
over
the kind of shit that's you know, it's that somebody needs to say like, hey, no, come on, this is wrong. Let me tell you why, but we got a better thing, you know, we can, or whatever, you know. And it's funny because you talked about some Led Zeppelin stuff, because that was another quote that it was from my interview with Ed, where he talked about, we got the tape, you know, and we in the van and we popped it in. And I know that thing very well because I love that interview with Ed. And it's like, and we were expecting to sound like Led Zeppelin and we were really disappointed, you know. And it's like, my interview. I mean, I don't care that it's me. I just want people to read that quote in its full context, you know, in the context of what Ed said before and what he said after it, because he was talking about the making of the first album in more detail. I want the book to lead people to that, you know. So But anyways, it's being fixed. And it was amazing how fast it happened. It happened in less than 24 hours once we informed the powers that be, and they said, like, we fucked up.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
that's what I was gonna also say to you. Do you think that honestly, like Al, oops, oh fuck.
It's not Al though. Al may never even know about this. I mean, he probably will know because he has to change, or somebody has to change that author's note at the back of the book to include the title of our book in there. But it's really, you know, Ariel Levy, however you say her name, you know, it's really on her, you know, it's really on her. It's on her editor, who's the one who admitted to the fault to us and apologized profusely for the oversight. It's upon the legal department at HarperCollins, who's, God damn it, you know, our book, our lawyers at Hachette went through every single fucking word of our book. And I know it because they were calling out things like, well, you said that Valerie was wondering, you know, what she got into in 1981 when Ed was like vanished to make fair warning, you know? And I had to change that to like, Valerie probably wondered I had to make it more vague. I couldn't say that she was wondering. She wondered what she got into. I had to say she probably wondered what she got into because I didn't know, you know? It's like, well, she tell you that? Did you absolutely know that? It's like, no, I did not know that. For sure. So we had to be more vague about it. We had to be a little bit less definitive about it. That's the kind of detail that our lawyers went through. Right. So why didn't they catch all this stuff? Why didn't they catch when Ed told a journalist, you know, this other stuff? I mean, you know, you don't have to thank for this. I got to tell you guys, this is the greatest thing. You don't have to thank for noticing this stuff. And if anybody wants to blame anybody, it's Steve Lukather and his shrinking penis, because that's what caused me to say, that's my fucking interview. Was I was reading about when Lukather first heard Eruption. And I just remember when he says, like, I heard it and blah, 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 this, that, and the other, my penis shrank. I said, like, I'm like Scooby here. You know, like, wait a second. And I got out the book and I'm like, and my penis shrank. Right. Like, quote, where's the attribution? It just says Steve Lukather. You guys didn't interview Steve Lukather. I'll tell you one thing that people don't know, and Greg Renoff confirmed this. They did interview Don Landy. They did get new information out of Don Landy in the book. Hallelujah. Yeah. Another thing that's worth the admission. Right. You know, it would have been nice to have that played up a little bit. Yeah. So there are gems in there. It's great, you know. Yeah, I love the book. I love Alex. I love Van Halen. I love the family and everything like that. Man, they can be really difficult to work with sometimes, but you know what? At the end of the day, it's worth it.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris, for the insight and the clarification and all that.
Yeah,
and like, I mean, I'll have to buy the second edition because I'm gonna want that.
Hate is gonna hate, you know, and that's the thing. I mean, it's I gotta carry a fucking 9mm Ruger around with me in my belt, you know, just in case I run into the one fucking psycho out there, you know. But
well, Chris. You know, we appreciate the fact that you've jumped on here, you know, with us. And, you know, you mentioned earlier that, you know, you like hanging out with us and fans, and we appreciate having you on the show. And, you know,
and we're all nerds,
I'm sure
Andrew, we're all nerds.
Now, I mean, anybody who questions my devotion to you guys, I did the full 8 hours with you on one of those, the tribute show the year before last. I did the entire thing, you know, and I was just like starting to see stuff. It was just like the sky was starting to open up and like lizards were crawling at me and everything like that. But it's like,
and Chris, I told Brad and Andrew I felt horrible. It was my wife's 50th birthday. We went to dinner and I got pissed. And I came home and passed out. And I woke up at like 6 a.m. I'm like, I missed the whole fucking thing.
It was a great show, Chris. But you know, look, we do look forward to catching up with you guys for another show. I'm sure we'll pencil something in because, you know, one of the reasons why we've done this show is because we wanted to give Chris an opportunity to present some facts we know there's going to be a lot of Van Halen fans out there who really appreciate this information, John, don't we? And there's going to be probably some who won't.
Yeah. And
for whatever reason.
You know, hate me, go ahead, you know, but just, you know, facts are
Facts
facts.
matter,
That's all I can
Chris.
say. You know, I don't want to seem like whatever, but you know, and I know a lot of people like the myth and their little stuff and all that, but this is not myth. This is just, you know, this is stuff. It can be backed up with photos, documents, recordings, what have you, you know, and even like people talk about words and it's like, well, yeah, everyone has different memories. You know, I don't want to go off on another thing, but it's just like, you know, I got together with some old friends I hadn't seen for 40 years and talking about stuff. And there's some events that they talked about that I don't remember at all. And there's other things that's like, I know for sure that didn't happen that way, you know? So memory, the brain is a weird flipping organ. It does some strange effing things. And it's like, no wonder people mess around with psychedelic drugs, man, because you can unlock some weird crap out there. But read Alex's book. If you haven't already, damn it. What kind of Van Halen fan are you? Go out and buy it, you know, go out and buy that book. You know,
you got to read it.
Let's keep it up on the bestseller charts for a while. Let's keep Van Halen's name alive. Let's keep people talking about Eddie Van Halen, because that's what we tried to do with Eruption, you know, and we did a tribute, unfortunately, when, you know, David Lee Roth couldn't get his ego in check, you know, which I wish that was in the book. You know, I think the Alex interviews have actually been more revealing than anything. And that's worthy of another show. Let's talk about the Alex interviews, you know, that he's done with the press. Cause I think there's a lot of topics to talk about there. There's some really, that's the stuff I wish was in the book more, you know?
Yeah.
I agree, Chris. I agree. Yeah.
Well, thank you, guys. We're looking at the 2-hour mark for the show. We really appreciate the fact that we had about 35, 36 people at one stage hanging out with us. And if you are watching on a replay and you want to make some comments about anything that we've said and our opinions and thoughts on this show, please leave them here on the comments, and we'll come back to them. We'll come back soon, I promise you, with another show talking about some of the points, at least, that Chris has brought up. And thank you also for the folks out there who gave us some super chats. We don't go live for that, but we always appreciate any little bit that you guys give to help keep the channel running. We're not going to do a shout out, guys, to everybody in the chat. You guys are all our family and friends here. You guys know that you're important to us. So thank you for hanging out. Please subscribe to our channel, and also our friends. If you go to our community page there, you'll see our community page with all our friends. Adam's there. And also at the end of this, if you're watching on a replay, I'll have some links to Chris, to Mikey, to John, and also to Brad's social media account, so you can go and follow the guys over there. And we're going to give Chris, guys, if that's okay, the last word, and we'll let you guys carry on. Chris, if you can give us some last words, please.
Again, as I said, read Alex's book. You know, it's a definite nice addition to the Van Halen legacy and history and everything. You know, yeah, it's got some things that I bitched about, and you guys can hear them here and whatever, but, you know, I still enjoy it, you know, for what it is. And what it is really good, you know, and I'm glad he did it and everything. I do want to say this whole ordeal is going to be good for you guys, because if we can get what we got going, there's going to be more. So, you know, the success of Alex's book and, you know, what it's done for the community is opening some doors to some other stuff. So stay tuned.
All right.
Thanks, Chris. You're a legend.
Thank you, Chris. God bless you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Thank the Van Halen community and the fans and everything. I love you people.
Yeah, we love
you. And if you make a comment after the fact, I will respond to them too. So I do look at them. I'm not one of those people who just vanishes and like, I'm going to have breakfast.
All right. We're out of here. We're going to play some Jump, and then we're going to play the proper ending video for the show, and we'll catch up with you guys next time on the channel. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
Not bad, eh? Not bad, eh?
Oh, I got a little bit off my chest, so.
All right. See you guys later. Don't go anywhere, Chris.
Okay.